that goes to anybody who just you can email me directly if you have any particular questions. Okay, so we're exploring another component of the religion of Jesus, which is focusing on the awareness. And what it, okay, we talked about the going back in our previous month. We talked about before we talked about this, the Genesis model. So understanding the Greg rhythm, which birthed life, which was their whole orientation of how they looked at life. There's the void, there's the mystery, there's the mystery, there's the of God, and out of that mystery, out of that void comes forth creation, comes the creative power, the creative activity of God. And once the creative activity and power of God has ceased, there's Sabbath, there's stillness, there's rest, and then that rest, that Sabbath returns us back to the void, and out of the void, we are able to create, we are able to give life in a life-giving way, in a vital way. So, understanding that this is the rhythm, this is the pattern which formed Jesus. The void, the mystery of God, creative activity, and Sabbath, and rest, and stillness, and silence. So, if this pattern of the way that we can really be people that are vessels which we are called to be, as soon as you are baptized in the Christian church, as soon as you're baptized, you are considered a minister. Period. Every person who's baptized is considered a minister. Everyone has a different ministry, but you are considered a minister. So how do we move in the world in a life-giving way? How do we speak life to people? How do we do life-giving things? And how we become vessels of healing and new life and rebirth? We do that by resting in the Sabbath, allowing the Sabbath to return us back to the mystery of God, the void of God, and out of that void, out of that mystery, out of the magnitude of God, of the God we know and God we don't know, we come out and we speak and we talk and we act and we live and when we come out of the void, that's how we live a transformative life. Now we can live a very productive life, just doing our own thing, but if we want to live a life-giving, transformative life, we have to honor this: the creation, Sabbath, resting in the void, and coming out of that void. We talked about the prophetic principles of goodness, emptiness, and fullness. So, Jesus was a Hebrew prophet. If we want to boil, you can't. That Jesus accepted as a prophet across denominations, across religions. That's a perfect way to start, and we can build up from there. So we look at the prophetic principles that kind of guided the Hebrew prophet, which Jesus was. He was formed by the great tradition. We see the principle of goodness, doing what God has called us to do, doing what God has commanded us to do. The principle of emptiness, emptying ourselves out, going through a process of letting go, of emptying out, so that the Spirit can move through us and the kingdom of God can come through us and transform the world. So in the Christian tradition, our goal is not emptiness. Emptiness is just a means to an end. We become empty so that we can become full of God's Spirit, and we don't hold on to that. We let that Spirit pass through, and then we live a life of goodness, and we practice emptying out again. Emptiness, or kenosis, is what it's called in the Greek tradition. That process of emptying out or pouring out, so that the Spirit can fill us. And we talked about last week that God has a preferential treatment for empty vessels. Why? Because empty vessels can be full of God's Spirit. So preferential treatment for emptiness. And we began to talk about awareness last week, and we'll look at that. But I just want to flush that out. We're going to go deeper with awareness. But before we do that, I want us to look at a clip. And this is going to clip that's going to hopefully be a transition for us to think about the power of awareness, and how do we transition between different states of awareness. So last week we talked about the different types of awareness, and we'll review that. And this week we're going to just put our baby toe into how do we begin the transition, how do we navigate between among different levels of awareness, different states of consciousness.
That's your question about that.
Yes.
If you are not empty, can you still transcend through those levels? I mean, is it possible to get to those different states if you haven't completely empty?
Yeah, I mean, because it's not about, I mean, God uses what is available.
Okay.
So if you give God a little bit of space, God will use a little bit of space. God will put more space, but you'll take what you can get. So yeah, and that's a good question. I mean, it's not a all or nothing. This is and you'll see in the scriptures that there are people generally at the beginning of their life who are very empty at the beginning, but then they become full as they accumulate and as they become more prestigious, and then they have to go through the emptying out process again.
Right.
So God can use them less because they become too full.
Would you give examples of emptiness? Like, in my mind, it sounds kind of like a painful.
Yeah. But it is painful. But yes, we're gonna give examples. But David's an excellent example of someone who started out empty, became full, then got emptied out again, and it's like he went through the whole trajectory up, the nadir, the apex, back to the nadir. So Davis is an example of that. But we'll go through biblical examples. Okay. So I want us to look at a clip. This is a clip by MD, by a doctor, talking about the power of the mind. And I think this is a good transition to our no, he good. Thank you. This is a good transition to our conversation of awareness. So let's give this a try.
Can the mind really heal the body? And if so, is there any scientific evidence to convince skeptical physicians like me? These are the questions that fueled the last few years of my research. And what I discovered is that the scientific community, the medical establishment, has been proving for over 50 years that the mind can heal the body. We call it the placebo effect. And we've been trying to outsmart it for decades. The placebo effect is a thorn in the side of the medical establishment. It's an inconvenient truth that gets in between trying to bring new treatments, new surgeries into the medical establishment. So it's a problem, supposedly. But I actually think this is really good news. The placebo effect is excellent news because it's concrete evidence that the body holds within it innate self-repair mechanisms that can make unthinkable things happen to the body. So if you find this surprising, if you have a hard time believing that the body can heal itself, you need look no further than the Spontaneous Remission Project, a database compiled by the Institute of Noetic Sciences of over 3,500 case studies in the medical literature of patients who have gotten better from seemingly incurable illnesses. You think there's such a thing as an incurable illness? I swear, if you go look at this database, it'll blow your mind. Everything's in there. Stage 4 cancers that disappeared without treatment. HIV positive patients that became HIV negative. Heart disease, kidney failure, diabetes, high blood pressure, thyroid disease, autoimmune diseases, gone. A great example of this in the medical literature is a case study from 1957 of Mr. Wright, who had advanced lymphosarcoma. So things weren't going well for Mr. Wright. Time was really running out. He had tumors the size of oranges in his armpits, his neck, his chest, his abdomen, his liver and his spleen were enlarged, and his lungs were filling up with 2 quarts of milky fluid every day that had to be drained in order for him to breathe. But Mr. Wright wasn't giving up hope. He had heard about this wonder drug called Kreviosin, and he was begging his doctor, come on, just give me some of that Kreviosin, it's all going to be good. Now, unfortunately, the Kreviosin was only available on a research protocol, and the protocol required that the doctor be able to make an assessment that says that this guy has at least 3 months to live. And his doctor, Dr. West, just couldn't do that. But Mr. Wright was tenacious, and he didn't give up. He kept badgering his doctor, until finally his doctor was like, okay, fine, I'll give you the Kreviosin. So he dosed him up on a Friday, not expecting that Mr. Wright would make it through the weekend. But to his utter shock, when Dr. West came in to do rounds on Monday, Mr. Wright was up walking around the wards, and his tumors had shrunk to half their original size. They had melted like snowballs on a hot stove, and 10 days after getting the Kreviosin, they were gone. So Mr. Wright was up rocking and rolling, like praising Kreviosin as the miracle drug he believed it to be, for 2 months, until the initial reports came out about Kreviosin that said that it didn't really look like Kreviosin was working so well. And Mr. Wright fell into a deep depression, and his cancer came back. So this time Dr. West decided to get sneaky, and he told his patient that, you know, that Kreviosin that you got, that was a tainted version, really not so good. But I got us some ultra pure, highly concentrated Kreviosin. This stuff's got it going on. He then injected Mr. Wright with nothing but distilled water. And once again, the tumors disappeared, the fluid in his lungs went away. Mr. Wright was up rocking and rolling for another 2 months. And then the American Medical Association blew it by publishing a nationwide study that proved definitively Kreviosin was worthless. 2 days later, Mr. Wright, after hearing this news, died. Soon after that, I came across another study in the medical literature that was the stuff of fairy tales. 3 baby girls were born, delivered by a midwife on Friday the 13th in the Okefenokee Swamp near the Georgia-Florida border. And the midwife pronounced that these 3 babies born on such a fateful day were all hexed. The first, she said, would die before her 16th birthday. The second, before her 21st. The third, before her 23rd birthday. And as it turned out, the first girl died the day before her 16th birthday. The second died the day before her 21st birthday. And the third girl, who knew what had happened to the other 2, got wind of that. On the day before her 23rd birthday, she showed up at the hospital hyperventilating, begging them to make sure she survived. She wound up dying that night. These 2 case studies are great examples from the medical literature of the placebo effect and its opposite, the nocebo effect. So Mr. Wright, when he got that distilled water and his tumors melted away, that's a great example of the placebo effect, when you get a seemingly inert treatment, and yet something's happening physiologically in the body, such that disease goes away. The nocebo effect is the opposite. So the 3 hexed girls are an example of the nocebo effect, when the mind's belief that something bad is going to happen in the body then comes to manifest. So the scientific literature, the medical journals like the New England Journal of Medicine and the Journal of the American Medical Association, these scientific journals are full of evidence that the placebo effect and the nocebo effect are incredibly powerful. We've known this since the 1950s, and we've seen countless case studies that show that in almost everything you study, if you give people a fake treatment, a sugar pill, a saline injection, or most effectively, a fake surgery, 18 to 80% of the time, people get better. And it's not just in their mind. That's what I thought in the beginning, like, oh, they're just feeling better, they're thinking better. But it's not, it's actually in their physiology. This is measurable. You can actually see what happens to the body. So, for example, patients getting placebos were found to have ulcers that healed, colons that became less inflamed, bronchi that dilated, warts that disappeared. Cells looked different under the microscope. It's provable. It's happening in the body, even though it's initiated by the mind. So when you look at these, some of the studies are just amazing. I love the Rogaine study. So, you get a bunch of bald men, you give them placebos, they grow hair. The opposite is also true. So if you give people a placebo and you tell them it's chemotherapy, they vomit and they lose their hair. So this is really happening in the body. And the question that I had is it just the mind's positive belief that's making this happen? Not according to Harvard researcher Ted Kaptchuk. According to him, he thinks that the most essential part is actually the nurturing care of a healthcare provider, more so even than the mind's positive belief. That some of the studies actually say the doctor is the placebo, or can be. So Ted Kaptchuk wanted to study this, and he did a great study looking at patients that were getting placebos for an illness, for treatment of an illness, and he told them, you're getting a placebo. There's nothing in here, inert ingredients, nothing active. They still got better. Most likely, Kaptchuk postulated, because they felt tended, nurtured. They felt like they were doing something. They felt like somebody cared. So to say that you can heal yourself is sort of a misnomer. You know, the body can heal itself. The body has these innate natural self-repair mechanisms. But the scientific data proves that you need the tending, nurturing care of a healthcare provider of some sort, of a healer, to facilitate that process. It's not an easy process to go through alone. So it makes a big difference if somebody else is holding that positive belief with you. But the problem is, while the doctor can be the placebo, the doctor can also be the nocebo. So what patients need from us as healthcare providers, they need us to be forces of healing, not forces of fear or pessimism. So every time your doctor tells you you have an incurable illness, you're going to have to take that medication for the rest of your life. Or God forbid you get cancer and they say you've got a 5% 5-year survival rate. It's really no different than when that midwife told those 3 baby girls that they were hexed. It's a form of medical hexing that's so prevalent. As doctors, we think we're being realistic. You know, we're giving people kind of information we think they need to know, but we actually can be harming them. Instead, we need to be more like Dr. West. You know, taking that distilled water, really, Mr. Wright, I promise, this is going to do it for you. But do we have to count on our doctors to dupe us? You know, do we have to get fake surgeries and fake drugs and wind up in clinical trials? This is what led the next phase of my research. So in my last TEDx talk, I talked about a new wellness model that I developed called the Whole Health Cairn. And this came about as part of my research, trying to find how else can we harness this mind's power that's clearly evidenced by the placebo effect and the nocebo effect. Can we do something without being in a clinical trial? And my hypothesis was that in order to heal ourselves, in order to be optimally healthy, we need more than just a good diet, a regular exercise program, getting enough sleep, taking your vitamins, following your doctor's orders. Those things are all great and critical, important. But I also came to believe that we need healthy relationships, a healthy professional life, a healthy creative life, a healthy spiritual life, a healthy sex life, a healthy financial life, a healthy environment. In essence, we need a healthy mind. So I wanted to try to prove this. And I went into the medical literature, and the copious data that I found proving that all of those things are essential really blew my mind. I compiled them all into my upcoming book, Mind Over Medicine, Scientific Proof You Can Heal Yourself. But I want to give you a few highlights about what this is all about. So you can see from the Whole Health Cairn that all of these facets are built upon a foundation stone that I call your inner pilot light. And for me, that's that essential, authentic part of you that knows what's true for you, that's willing to tell you the truth about maybe what's out of alignment in your life, what stones in your Whole Health Cairn might be out of balance. And as you see, I've put the body, physical health, on the top of the Whole Health Cairn because it's the most fragile, the most precarious, and the most easy to kind of fall out of balance if other things in your life aren't going so well. So what I found in the medical data is that relationships matter. People who have a strong social network have half the rate of heart disease compared to those who are lonely. Married people are twice as likely to live long lives than unmarried people. In fact, curing your loneliness may be the most important measure of prevention you can enact upon your body, more so than quitting smoking or starting to exercise. Your spiritual life matters. Those who attend religious services live up to 14 years longer. Your professional life matters. You really can work yourself to death. In Japan, they call it karoshi, death by overwork. And people who survive, the survivors of those who die of karoshi can actually apply for workman's comp-like benefits in Japan. But it's not just Japan, it's actually happening even more in the United States. We just don't get benefits here. So they did one study and they found that people who fail to take their vacation are actually a third more likely to get heart disease. Your attitude really matters. Happy people live 7 to 10 years longer than unhappy people. And optimists are 77% less likely to get heart disease than pessimists. So how does this happen? What's happening in the brain that's making the body change? This was what's...
Okay. And then she goes into more and more technical, neurological things. We don't even talk about that right now. So what I want you to focus, what I want you to just spend some time reflecting on is, and this is becoming gaining more and more steam of reversing how we look at the placebo and nocebo effect. Instead of instead of looking at it as something that we have to overcome in order to get the clinical trial, to get the clinical test approved. Because in order for a drug to be approved, it has to reach a certain threshold over placebo. So that's what she was indicating, referring to. But in reference to us, I want you to know me that the placebo effect is not a negative thing. It's not a negative thing. It's becoming more, you look at it differently, even by the scientific community. I want you to write down where is one place where the placebo effect is impacting your life and the nocebo effect is impacting your life right now.
Or personalized?
Yeah, personalized, exactly. Really looking at it in the light that she just discussed. So I'll put it up here. Okay, so can you identify one placebo effect and one nocebo effect in your life right now? Keeping in mind what we just heard. And if you struggle with don't get caught up in the word. What is one aspect in your life? Let me just make it very plain. Where your attitude or mindset is helping you in a positive way and is hurting you. That's just what the lesson stay in place. What is one aspect in your life where your mindset, your attitude is hurting you, and where it's helping you? That's not the same. Ted, why do you look so perplexed?
I'm trying to digest that.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just trying to.
Yeah, one more minute. Lisa Rankin. Lisa with two S's. Okay, so any reflection, anything you want to share from that question? Just give me your best shot. Okay. So what are places in your life where you believe your mindset or your and hopefully you'll better answer this question better at the end of it. But where your mindset is, your attitude is either helping you or hurting you, preferably in a emotional and physical way. Can you give examples of that? Yeah.
Okay, my placebo effect will be the fact that I love people. So this gives me the mindset every day to go out and do everything that I can do to assist.
Okay.
And my nocebo effect would be, I don't want to say no love of self, but I'm gonna go to the aspect of me smoking cigarettes. That's my physical, like the mindset that I have habits. Like I get in the car and I want to drive, I smoke a cigarette. This effect is a negative on me. The mindset is a negative.
What's the mindset? What's the mindset behind that?
The mindset is more like, that's where I came from, like, no, I don't want to say no love of self, but I know the effects of it.
This is just
But
me or something like
it's the
Belief that it will make you calm.
I guess it's calming and it's also habit. It's a habit, like I get in the car, I want to smoke a cigarette.
But what's the thought or what's the strain of consciousness behind that habit? That's what I'm doing. What's the consciousness behind that?
I guess relief. It's almost like a stress reliever in the mind.
Right.
The mind says that it's relieving stress,
Okay.
but physically I know that it hurts. But
Okay.
because of the mindset, it overpowers the physical.
The mindset that I have to smoke.
Yeah, and then
Okay.
it calms me. It's almost like a calm.
Well, that's the physical, right? Okay.
But it's a mental too.
Right.
But
Those are my two.
Okay.
I also heard her say that something about herself, how she's perceiving herself,
Right.
her
Right.
self-love. So
Yeah, it's
it
love
makes
of
me
self.
wonder if that's part of the thought.
It might be subconscious.
So lack of love of self.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. That's getting kind of close to it. Okay.
You
So.
go deep. I'll take it.
I don't think people start smoking because of lack of love of self. I think they do it sometimes to fit in or be cool or.
It's release.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
we're not universal. We're just talking about Shanika. Yeah. We're just talking about me.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't start smoking because it was cool. I think I started doing it because it was just something that was going on. So maybe you could say that was cool.
Okay.
Yeah, like environmental, but then it becomes habit.
Okay.
And that's what it is now, like, it's more of a habit.
Okay.
I get in the car, I want to smoke a cigarette,
Okay.
relaxing. It's like a sense of relaxation. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. So what else? Liv?
So as I get older, I spend a lot of time sending out sympathy cards. And the more I do that, the more conscious I've become of my own mortality. And I keep thinking, you're next. It's coming. And it seems like it's something that, when you hit it your late 60s, you start to do so often until it sets in your mind that instead of living day to day, you're focused on all the people who died or all the people who are gone out of your life. So that's definitely
Nocebo.
That's definitely nocebo.
Okay. So a focus on death.
Okay.
No, I mean, is that we said focus on loss or focus on loss? Or?
On loss. maybe.
Okay.
Yeah. Focus on loss.
Okay. So what would be your placebo then?
Every 60 days, I have to go to the firing range, and I use people, and it makes me do well.
Okay.
issues and people, and if I do that, I do well. If I'm just,
Okay, so what's the consciousness behind that practice?
the consciousness is I want to do well.
Okay.
And I know if I focus on people or issues or things that are uncomfortable to me, I will do well.
Okay. So this will help me. Just will help me focus. Help me do
It'll
well.
help me focus.
Okay.
Yeah.
Help me focus. Fiery range.
He'll tell you.
Okay.
He's saying that's part of your-
Mental note: do not get on the
We would always say, no, no, no. I
Okay. Who else want to share? Marjorie, yeah.
Mine isn't quite as exciting.
Okay.
It's just that it's the positive and the negative of me telling myself that I am or that I am not tired. So I can be tired and tell myself that I'm not, and I can get 8 million things accomplished, and I could have gotten a good night's sleep and just, oh, I'm tired, and I can't do anything.
That's a very clear, concise one. I'm not tired. I am tired. Yeah. Telling your body how it feels. Yeah. Good. What else? What more? Yeah.
Mine was similar to hers, but mine is on stress. Telling myself that I'm really too blessed to be stressed, to use a cliche.
Uh-huh.
But I mean, I really do believe that. And it really helps me to relieve that stress.
So just the thought of that you're blessed. The thought of blessed helps you relieve stress. Okay.
Yes.
Good.
And then the other side of that is I am an avid walker, and yet I know I've reached sort of a plateau with it, and I need to increase what I do exercise-wise, but I keep saying to myself, well, I'm successful in walking because I can do that and can work that into a regular day, but I don't have time to do anything else.
Okay, so telling yourself you don't have time to do. Okay. Or I can't do something.
I can't, yeah.
I can't do. Okay, good.
I could do it, but I won't be able to sustain it, is what I tell myself.
Okay.
So, but this walking, I've been able to sustain that, so why mess this up?
Right, okay. Good. That's a good transition. That's a good transition. Okay. So this is very important. This is a good segue into understanding state of consciousness and really the transition of consciousness. So let's do a little review so we can all be on the same page, and then we'll take one step forward into this. So last week we talked about levels of consciousness, and if you want to understand the religion of Jesus, and particularly if you want to have a deeper understanding of scriptures, we have to understand that there are different levels of consciousness in the scriptures. There are different battles of consciousness in the scriptures, and there are different levels of consciousness in our walk, in our Christian walk. So we talked about the terrestrial level of consciousness. Terrestrial is just earthly. So I'm aware of those things which I can, discern or see, hear, touch, smell, taste. With my senses, the empirical world. That we're in a terrestrial state of consciousness. So I'm aware of the empirical world. I'm aware of the physical world, the earthly sphere, and that is what I'm paying attention to. Above the terrestrial state of consciousness, we have the intermediate. So we talked about intermediate is the best example of that. That is really looked at as the state of consciousness I experienced in the dream state. So we did a whole year on dreams. We talked about how the language of dreams is different from the language of our ordinary life. Normally the dreams always are in the form of parables, symbols, and so that intermediate state. There are other forms that we can talk about, but that twilight type of consciousness in which we are aware of different things. And the thing about the dream state, as an example of the intermediate state, is the fact that, you know, the laws of the dream world don't apply to the terrestrial world. That's why in your dreams you can do different things, you can go different places, or you can interact with different people, or things can be merged, because you're in a whole different state of consciousness. You know, so this state of consciousness has a certain amount of rules, a certain parameters, and this state of consciousness has another state of rules and parameters. And then above the intermediate, we have the celestial state of consciousness, and that is the heavenly state of consciousness. So that's the state of consciousness that we see of revelation, of God bringing prophets up to the state of revelation, of God speaking revelation into prophets, and the prophets speaking it out. A good biblical examples of that is, you know, you think about the whole, the book of Revelations, or Ezekiel, or Isaiah, or you know, Jeremiah. They all talk about, particularly Isaiah, you know, talking about, you know, before, you know, God brought me up to a celestial realm, and then from that celestial realm, God began to speak to me and so into me. So it's a celestial state of consciousness expressing earthly terms, because as soon as you put it down on paper, it's terrestrial in its language. But it's still a terrestrial, comes from a celestial state of consciousness. So these are the basics. We're not going to, let's just stick with these, you know, these 3 levels of consciousness that we talked about last week. And we talked about the struggle in our lives, and the struggle all through our scriptures is that we are always trying to bring God down to the terrestrial state of consciousness. We are always trying to bring God down to our level, and God is always trying to bring us up to the celestial. So that's the constant struggle that we have of, I want to make God relate to me. I want God to make sense to me. So I want to bring God down, and God is always fighting back and trying to bring us back up. And we see that the battle happens a lot in this intermediary state. And that's why you see so many passages in the Bible in which God's speaking to people in their dreams. Because really that's almost like the battleground between the terrestrial and celestial. It's like the in-between state. So we see this all throughout scriptures of this struggle. And when we talk about it in Jesus, we're going to talk about how when Jesus was interacting with people, Jesus was really, what did Jesus do? Jesus was always trying to bring his disciples from that terrestrial state of consciousness, which basically, their state of consciousness was the kingdom of God is Israel taking over or overthrowing the Roman Empire. That was a terrestrial way of looking at it. It was very earthly, it was very practical, it was very pragmatic. Israel is going to have a new King David, and we will rule over the Roman Empire, and we will be the top dog, and it won't be Rome anymore. So that was the mindset. It was all about that. It was very practical, very terrestrial, and Jesus was always struggling with them and trying to get them to understand a celestial understanding of the kingdom of God. They had a very terrestrial, very pragmatic, which we probably overlook now. We don't really realize how tangible their understanding of the kingdom of God was coming out of their context. So the constant struggle in the scriptures is between the struggle between God and man. So God struggles to bring man up to a higher levels of consciousness, and man struggles to bring God down to the terrestrial realm of consciousness. And a lot of times, why does God speak to so many people, you know, through the scriptures and dreams? Because in our sleep state, that's when we generally have our guards down, and we're more open. Because in our conscious waking state, we're always trying to fit God into our plans, our agenda, our timetable, our way of thinking. So we're always in the defensive. We're always trying to make God fit into whatever we want to be or whatever we want to happen. But in the dream state, we're more open, so that's one of the reasons why so many things happen in dream state, because most of the time we're so transfixed on our own agenda that we don't even let God penetrate it. We don't even let God in, to bring us up to that higher state. For most of us, but some are open even in the waking state. We looked at Samuel 3, 1 through 10, and talked about how, God was calling Samuel, and Samuel was running to Eli the priest because Samuel didn't understand the voice of God yet. And, you know, and so when Samuel finally understood that it was the voice of God speaking to him, instead of doing something which is a terrestrial response, Samuel just sat and was still and allowed the voice to come and allowed the voice to speak to him. We talked about Exodus 3, we talked about just a great example of Moses, and the first thing that Moses said was, God, tell me your name, so I can go take your name and tell the people. In other words, God, give me something, give me a box so I can put you in, so when I go talk to people about you, I can tell them, you know, and God says, I am who I am. So I'm not going to allow you to bring me down to that level. We talked about Joseph and Joseph's brothers, and how Joseph was trying to tell his brothers a dream about what he was experiencing, what God was doing with him, and Joseph's brothers rejected the dream because they only had a terrestrial state of consciousness. So we see it all throughout the scriptures, this battle between the terrestrial, the intermediate, and the celestial state, and we're always in a constant struggle between that. We're always in a constant struggle between that. I can really go on the side note about spiritual warfare, but I won't go there. Because we already did that. So is that clear? Does that make sense? Is that what we talked about so far? We're good? Okay. So the question now, what I want us to think about is, what is the door? If we understand on the fundamental level that there are different states of consciousness, and the video was so good because what the scientific community is just niching and tapping onto is that, you know, they're giving a little bit of credence, just a tiny bit of credence to the fact that there are some things that, you know, are way beyond, there are many things that are way beyond explanation, and that we could possibly use this as a way to enter into, you know, understanding and healing of the body and the mind, just from their perspective. So there's so much more out there than what we're aware of, and there's ways to navigate, you know, into those different realms of awareness, different realms of consciousness that have physical, tangible implications and repercussions for us. And, you know, so she was really talking about from a medical perspective of, it's something you can't explain it, but for some reason, for some people, when they believe something is true, it physically changes their makeup. And it's documented after that. You know, when people get in their minds, it physically changes something, and we don't know why that happens, we don't know how that happens, but it's no debate that it does happen. So there are ways in which people are transitioning out of this realm in which, you know, it's just what I can hear, feel, taste, and see. I have this disease. I will always have disease. There's no way I can get rid of disease. And somehow they're able to get into a whole nother state in which they don't have it. And I won't even talk about, because you know the meditation of how certain people, when they enter into deep levels of meditative trances. I studied with a guy. I took a workshop with a guy. He was doing some research, brilliant stuff. And he was talking about how when people get in a deep enough state of meditation, they don't have like certain diseases like diabetes when they're in the meditative state. And then when they come back out of the meditative state, it resumes. So they were just doing studies on that, of how even going to certain states of consciousness changes your literally your physical makeup. So, I mean, it was fascinating talking to him. But, so the question is, for our purposes, what is the door and what is the hallway that leads to these different realms and these different sub-realms, higher or lower? And they're really prevalent in Scripture. So the first door, and you know, is God's grace. Plain and simple. The first door is God's grace. So, God, and this is one thing that's kind of unique. God can use whomever God chooses to use, period.
Yeah.
Period. And it doesn't have to be any explanation. So you may be looking at somebody like, why in the world is God doing that? Because God wants to, and that's God's prerogative, and God can do that. Because God is God. So that's the first one, and there's really no debate about it. I mean, it's nothing really to talk about because that is just the mystery of God. So I mean, in point blank, that God can, in the Christianism we talk about the gift of contemplation. God brings certain people in, and God unites with people and brings people up to certain levels just because it's in God's plan. It's really nothing that we can debate about or talk about. So that is what it is. But what I want to focus on, which is absolutely critical in understanding these states of consciousness, is the hallway. The hallway to higher realms of consciousness is this notion that we have to understand. So this is what I want to spend all of our time. So Yahweh, it's the Hebrew word Yahweh. This is the hallway in order, when we look at the scriptures, this is the hallway for entrance into higher realms of consciousness. Yahweh. So what is Yahweh? It's translated in the scriptures, and when we talked about it at the beginning, we see this is a very common translation. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of all wisdom. This word, the English word fear, literally is the comes from the Hebrew Yahweh, and so we think about fear, and the fear, the Yahweh. I want you to use the Hebrew word instead of this word, because this word has certain connotations that we can't get out of our mind. We're really talking about, there is a notion of fright, I'm not going to say that there's a present, but there's also this notion of awe. So the awe of the Lord, the reverence of the Lord, but I think the best translation is really awe. The awe of the Lord is the beginning of all wisdom. Yahweh. Yahweh is the beginning of all wisdom. Stay with the Hebrew, because the Hebrew word will allow you to disassociate it and go deeper. So if Yahweh, the hallway, the way that we walk towards higher states of consciousness is Yahweh. The door to the hallway is spiritual practice. And I'm going to give you one very practical example of that. So let's look at some symbols of that. So we have the hallway to higher realms of consciousness is Yahweh, and the door to the hallway is spiritual practice. Spiritual practice. Okay. Let's look at how prevalent, and the process can be nonlinear. But let's look at some scriptures. Okay. So we have Psalms 1:11-10. The fear of the Lord, the Yahweh of the Lord, is the beginning of wisdom. A good understanding have all those who do his commandments. His praise endures forever. How do I understand celestial truths? How do I understand the things of God? I can only understand the things of God if I am in awe of God. That is the only way. That is the only way. If I am in tune, if I am aware of, and I'm sensitive to the awesomeness of God, and only when I'm sensitive to the awesomeness of God can I have any understanding of the higher truths of God. Let me see how prevalent is in the scriptures. The fear of the Yahweh of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. The Yahweh of the Lord is the beginning of instruction. Let's look at other examples. Proverbs 9:10. The Yahweh of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and the knowledge of the Holy One is understanding. Proverbs 14:26. In the Yahweh of the Lord there is strong confidence, and his children will have a place of refuge. The Yahweh of the Lord is a fountain of life. to turn away from the snares of death. Better is a little with the Yahweh of the Lord than great treasure with trouble. Proverbs 15:33, the Yahweh of the Lord is the instruction of wisdom, and before honor is humility. So, let me make this very, very plain. It's so prevalent. You have two people, I always lift this up, example, you have two people who are in the same Bible study, who are in the same worship service, who are in the same service project, who are in the same classroom, whatever like that. We go on. One person comes into the room, comes into the sanctuary, comes into the place, and has a sense of reverence and respect, and respect is not even right. Has a sense and an attitude that there's an awesomeness about what they're about to engage in. The other person comes in and says, I can't wait till this is over. Both of them experience the same thing on the terrestrial level, but only one of them is open to the celestial truths. Is that you with me?
Yeah.
So it starts with the sense of all. So if I come in, if I go to a presentation, I believe this presenter don't know nothing. This is going to be a waste of my time. And if that's my disposition from the beginning, I'm probably not going to get that much out of it. If I come in with this is going to knock myself, this is going to be the best. I can't wait. It's all about the perspective in which you come in with. Now I'm making a very tangible example, but this in the spiritual realm, when they talk about the fear of the Lord, they're talking about those who have an awe of God's magnitude, those who have an awe of just the mystery of God, those who enter into their workplace and their homes and their churches and their businesses, or those who walk into spaces and they're sensitive and they're open to, or they're curious about just the infinite possibilities of God.